Hi, what's going on? I'm Coach Corey. It's been a little while since I've been up on my channel, but I'm really excited to bring you a kind of year-end review in terms of being on the carnivore diet for over a year now. And what I'm really gonna do is a book review. We're gonna talk about my top 10 books that I read this year related to nutrition. And I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about each book and why I loved it and why I think it's a must read. This list is specifically designed in order of how I would recommend that someone who's interested in low carbohydrate, or maybe you're just interested in starting a carnivore style of eating, this is the order in which I would recommend that you read these books. Something that I hate doing in YouTube videos is watching the whole thing without kind of getting the answer I'm looking for right away. So I'm gonna actually read you my top 10 books right now, and then we're gonna go into that full-on analysis. I'm gonna do the best that I can at putting some timestamps down below so that if you're interested in one of those books specifically, you can go ahead and find it here in this video. So my top 10 books that I read this year regarding nutrition and just wellness. Number 1 is The Carnivore Cure by Jenny Cho. Number 2 is Why We Get Sick by Ben Bikman. Number 3, this one was technically at the end of last year, but I'm counting it anyway. It's The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. Number 4 is The Dietitian's Dilemma by Michelle Hurn. Number 5 is Lies My Doctor Told Me by Dr. Ken Berry. Number 6 is Brain Energy by Christopher Palmer, MD. Number 7, The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre. I can't wait to talk to you about that one. Number 8 is Toxic Superfoods by Sally K. Norton. Number 9 is Estrogeneration by Anthony G. J. And number 10 is Fiat Food by Matthew Lysiak. Okay, I'm talking to you about The Carnivore Cure by Jenny Cho first. This book is just an amazing introduction into low carb, keto, and specifically, of course, the carnivore diet. Jenny Cho takes a very practical approach and includes a lot of her own personal experience, as do really all of these authors on this list. She really just considers health as a goal. She doesn't get too into the weeds around this being ancestral and the most appropriate for our DNA. And I'm all about that stuff, and I love learning those things. But if you're getting started, again, I just don't think we need to get that far into the weeds with it. Jenny Cho has an amazing protocol for treating the carnivore diet as an elimination diet to get healthy, to start to understand what foods work best in your body. So that protocol, along with graphs and charts and just the depth of information that she provides in this super easy read, I'm just all about it. So again, make this the number 1 book on your list for the coming year if you're interested in low carbohydrate eating or the carnivore diet. Next up on my list is Why We Get Sick by Ben Bikman. Ben Bikman is a cellular biologist. He specifically works with fat cells. Man, he is so knowledgeable, and he is so good at explaining the science and breaking it down into terms that we can understand. So kind of keeping this one short here, read his book, watch or listen to some of his lectures, and your knowledge in terms of low carbohydrate and what you know about insulin and how fat cells work is just gonna skyrocket. So he's just a wealth of knowledge, and it would be a shame to not tap into him. So put that book on your list for next year as well. Next, it's The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. Nina is such a famous figure in the low carbohydrate space because of the work that she's done in publishing this book and all of the research that she did. She is it when it comes to knowledge around the history of low carbohydrate and our nutritional guidelines here in the United States. So Nina is the one who went back and did all of the research. I mean, all of it. And her book covers all of it as well. So it's a long read. It can get dry, but if you're someone who really wants to understand the politics behind the nutritional guidelines here in the United States, and I think that this is a critical book for you to read. I think that once we understand the politics, it becomes a little bit easier to understand that low carbohydrate style of eating is likely the way to go. In The Dietitian's Dilemma by Michelle Hurn, we're sitting here at number 4. Michelle Hurn just has a very unique perspective, and her story and how she came to the low carbohydrate style of eating, it resonated with me. She had a history of really quite intense eating disorders and found low carbohydrate and truly healed and sent those eating disorders into remission. Again, just something that I could really relate to, as that's been a part of my journey as well. So Michelle Hurn, she's going to review some of the things that you're going to learn in the first 3 books that we talked about. But again, just with a different perspective, kind of putting a different, different verbiage on some of the things that you may already know around nutrition. I just loved how she phrased so much of her book, and I mean, it was powerful. It was a really great read. She's so knowledgeable. So that's The Dietitian's Dilemma, really bringing in that unique perspective from Michelle Hurn. One of the biggest characters in the low carb, keto, carnivore space is Dr. Ken Berry, and his book, Lies My Doctor Told Me, is awesome. He does a fantastic job of humanizing, the medical industry and just teaching you, hey, doctors are humans. There's a standard of care. It's really eye-opening in terms of really the standard of care and what doctors are taught. And so it just helps make that more relatable, right? I think in my position, it can be really easy to we have these doctors who are recommending lap band surgery when really all you need to do is cut out the sugar, the processed foods, the seed oils, cut the carbohydrates, and eat all meat, right? So it's triggering. He does a really good job, again, of humanizing the doctor and helping you understand what their training looks like and what their job is and how they feel. And he weaves his own story into there and how he came to the low carbohydrate style of eating as well. Here we go on number 6. It's Brain Energy by Christopher Palmer, MD. He's a psychiatrist, and his brain energy theory states that mental health disorders can be healed, can be put into remission using that low carbohydrate or ketogenic style of eating. He talks a lot about our favorite organelle, the mitochondria, the energy powerhouse of the cell, but really what he does is relate these mental health disorders back to a malfunctioning or an unhealthy mitochondria. Is it too much energy? Is there not enough energy? And he really dives into just what's happening in the body and the brain as we experience some of these psychological issues that we do, whether it's mental health, eating disorders. I mean, there's a whole array. So I can't recommend this one enough. Actually, all these books are so darn good. I mean, putting Chris Palmer at number 6 rather. It's so good. He could be number 1 too. All of these books could be number 1. I highly recommend Brain Energy. And again, I've struggled with depression and I've struggled with eating disorders. And I always knew that I should be able to address this with my lifestyle and with my nutrition. And he confirmed that, and that was exciting. I'm not someone who needs to be proven right, but it was very exciting to really dive in there and understand, hey, you do have control over some of this stuff, some of it, not all of it. And he really breaks it down for you in such a cool way. Uses a really solid, strong analogy throughout the whole book that just helps you understand the science. And again, just doing a really good job of helping maybe people who don't have a really high level of scientific acumen understand what he's talking about and what's going on there. Number 7 on my list is The Vegetarian Myth by Lierre. This is a book, whether you're considering carnivore, maybe you're fully plant-based, or you identify as vegan or vegetarian, it is a critical read. And honestly, the only reason that it's number 7 on my list is because it's dry. It's another one that can be difficult to get through, but once you're in a rhythm and you kind of sit down with it and you get reading, there were times where it triggered me so much, what Lierre was talking about in this book and the associations and just the relationships between our food industry, our agriculture industry, and then nutrition, of course, as well. I mean, it was so triggering when I sat down with this book. It was kind of like, okay, like you need to keep your cool, and I needed to be in a certain mood to read this book, but man, it was an excellent read. This is something that, again, we all need to read to understand the myths around the vegan or vegetarian or plant-based arguments, saying that it's more economical, it's better nutrition, and really just breaking down the ethical side of being a plant-based or a vegetarian as well. And so it is just exposing the truths, and it's so deep and so well researched. It is a must read. So number 7 on my list, but again, could have been number 1 or 2. Next up, it's number 8. It's Toxic Superfoods by Sally K. Norton. If you weren't planning on cutting out vegetables from your nutrition strategy before, once you read this book, you probably will. I know I did. This book dives into oxalate, a specific anti-nutrient that is found in most plants that we eat today at varying levels. So she really dives into the effects of high oxalate intake and how that impacts our health. And again, Sally K. Norton struggled with this as a vegan for so many years, trying to figure out her own health and finally learning that part of the problem were the vegetables. So I always joke, if you don't want to eat your vegetables, I'm probably the nutrition coach for you. Read this one to learn more about anti-nutrients and to understand just the real effect that some of these plants can really have in our bodies. Not all vegetables are healthy. And so I think it's a really great perspective. She writes a lot about the amounts of oxalate in foods, which can get a little bit into the weeds. And again, some of these books can be dry. They're educational. They're like textbooks. I worked through Toxic Superfoods probably over the course of like 3 months, which is a really slow read for me, but I'm happy that I got through it. And I highly recommend it for anyone who is interested in learning more about anti-nutrients and continuing their dive down the low carbohydrate rabbit hole. Number 9 on the list is Estrogeneration by Anthony G. J. I know I've said it in a couple of these books, another really dry read. I personally don't love when authors talk a lot about numbers and amounts and serving sizes and the amount of the toxin in it. When I first started reading this book, I actually put it down for the majority of this year because it felt like a whole other category of crap that I needed to worry about. What am I washing my body with? What kind of products am I using? What kinds of containers are they coming out of? Man, I'm just trying to eat a carnivore style here, eat carnivore. And it's just felt like I wasn't ready for it when I dove into it. And so that's why it's a little bit further down on the list. It's an excellent read, and it is knowledge that we want to have. And the truth about this whole entire book list is that this is the world that we live in, and knowledge is power. So expand your knowledge, read just a couple of these books on the list. And if that doesn't motivate you to maybe want to read a few more, dive into something that you feel passionate about and just keep learning. So Anthony G.J. talks a lot about how all of these different compounds around us, like I said, plastics, like the containers that your food are coming in and things like that, how they promote elevated levels of estrogen in the body, or how they act like estrogen in the body, and what that hormonal imbalance really does to us. So a good read, a little bit technical, but when you're ready for something a little more advanced, once you get through maybe a couple of the other books on this list or whatever else you may be reading and learning about, this could be a good one. Number 10, and the final book on my list here, is Fiat Food by Matthew Lysiak. And I do apologize if I pronounced his last name incorrectly. You might recognize this author from a TV show on Apple TV called Home Before Dark. So highly recommended. I'm not going to get into it right now, but just a little bit of backstory there. He's an investigative journalist, specifically writing about the history of our food chain. And again, he covers a lot of what Nina does, but in a much more digestible way. No pun intended. And really the only reason that this book is number 10 on my list is because I'm still reading it right now. Full transparency, but it had to make the list. This book is not a part of the Bitcoin Standard kind of book series from Safedine Amois. And again, names, I apologize if I pronounced it wrong. But really, really making the connections between our financial system and our nutritional guidelines, again, of the United States. So just a really amazing eye-opening read. And if you hop on over to my Instagram account, you can see I've posted that book there. I've posted a couple of other videos kind of relating back to what I'm currently learning in this book. It's likely that this book should be a little bit higher on the list, but I think because of the crossover with finance and, fiat money and things like that, it doesn't need to be a top one that you read. However, what I will say is, again, it's a little bit easier to follow the history of our nutritional guidelines in this book as opposed to Nina Teicholz. However, again, Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise, it has all of the information, right? So he didn't need to do that in this one. I highly recommend that you do some digging into Fiat food, and I recommend that you read maybe one or two of Safieddine Mois's books as well. And I know one of those is the Bitcoin Standard, and I can post some of that information below. All right, folks, that's what I have for you. Let's review that list one more time. If you stuck with me all the way to the end, this is amazing. Thank you. Number 1 was Jenny Cho's The Carnivore Cure. Number 2 was Ben Bikman's Why We Get Sick. Number 3 was Nina Teicholz's The Big Fat Surprise. 4, Michelle Hurn's The Dietitian's Dilemma. 5, Lies My Doctor Told Me by Ken Berry. Christopher Palmer's Brain Energy coming in at number 6. Number 7 was Lierre Keith with The Vegetarian Myth. 8, Sally K. Norton's Toxic Superfoods. Number 9, Anthony G.J.'s Estrogeneration. And number 10, Matt Lysiak, Fiat Foods. Listen, y'all, my goal this year was to read 2 books a month, and I didn't do it. But what I did do was read somewhere between 14 and 17 books this year. And I think that's probably 13 to 16 more books than I read last year. Expanding my knowledge when it comes to low carbohydrate and carnivore diets was the number 1 focus this year. And then really the number 2 focus behind learning about it was applying it, right? And doing that for myself. So I know I said at the beginning of that video, I was going to give you a little bit of an analysis of how my last year has gone. You know what? People talk about carnivore being so restrictive and being so challenging and hard. But once you have the knowledge and you understand what's going on in your mind and in your body, and honestly, in our government and the political side of it, not something I ever expected to get into. But when you start to get into that, it becomes extremely easy to make very healthy choices for yourself. I truly believe that 1 year into carnivore, I've sent my eating disorders and my depression into remission, and I don't know, I want to almost say like a controllable remission, in that there are certainly days where I wake up in a funk, but because my body is strong and the food that I give it is so healthy, I'm able to manage symptoms. I'm able to manage the difficult times where before it would have probably sent me, some of those events or some things that happen around me might have sent me into like a downward spiral. So just having control over the mind and the body, feeling in control, feeling in choice, and truly happy with what's going on in my life and the choices that I'm making, it makes it very easy to sit down to a steak dinner multiple times a week, to choose chicken over pasta, and to cook with healthy fats and to eat more butter and just be more aware of the food that goes in my mouth, because absolutely everything matters. Along with sending my depression into remission, I've completely cut out alcohol, which is probably a huge part of why that depression has gone into remission. I have a huge focus on probiotics, and I want to bring you guys a really cool video a little bit later around homemade kefir. So I've been making my own homemade, fermented milk, and it's been amazing. Oh man, happy gut, happy everything, I'm telling you. So I'm excited for next year to dive a little bit more into the gut microbiome and to kind of try to find some research that doesn't recommend a plant-based diet for a healthy microbiome. I don't believe that. I've learned so much about what is going on in our government, in big industry, big pharma, and big food. And so these books, as I kind of mentioned along the way, are just going to expand your mind. And once it's expanded, it cannot go back to the way it was before. So again, it's been pretty easy to stick with that nutrition strategy I think the one thing that has me the most bummed is that we're currently not doing the majority of our shopping at our local meat market. It's with inflation, and again, y'all read Fiat foods, but with inflation, we've kind of been forced to save money, make smarter choices, and do a lot of our shopping at Costco. But even consuming those Costco meats, I still feel great. Carnivore is not about all grass-fed, grass-finished all the time. Hop on over to my Instagram. I've got a great little reel on that as well. Read the captions, y'all. It's money. I want to thank you for kind of coming along on this journey with me. Just this video right here. I do really appreciate your time and attention. If you have questions, comments, or concerns about anything that I said in this video, feel free to comment down below and I'll be checking on those comments. Thanks again, and I'll be back here with you soon.